So welcome everybody. I think we're close to 100 participants already, so I'm going to make a start. We have a very ambitious agenda today. We aim to present you with an update of activities within the Interagency Standing Committee to collectively protect from sexual exploitation and abuse and sexual harassment. We'll present what UNHCR highlighted during their championship, as well as UNFPA. And in the second part of today's webinar, we'll zoom in on improving our efforts for victim assistance and protection. So as Sarah has helped us with the poll questions, we'd just like to know who's our audience today. If you can add in the polling function on the bottom right, where you're coming from and which type of organization you belong to. And let's just start. I think on the screen you see, can I show my first speakers? I want to introduce Amit Sen, the Senior Interagency Coordinator from UNHCR, and Eva Bolkart, the Senior Coordinator for Protection from Sexual Exploitation and Abuse and Sexual Harassment at UNFPA. These will be our two first presenters in the first part of this panel. So, Sarah, can we go to the next section, please? Maybe we'll come back to this poll when we finish the geographic poll. If you can go to the next slide. So I'm going to introduce just the IASC strategy. Wait, go back one, sorry, Sarah. Back one slide. Just to say, you've received, I hope, the objective of today's event as well as the panelists. So as I mentioned, we'll start with an introduction to the IASC Championships. Eva and Amit will present first on the 2020 UNHCR Championship, and then Eva on UNFPA. And then the second half of the panel will have specialists from Unicef, the Gender-Based Violence Subcluster Coordinator from Afghanistan, International Rescue Committee, and UNFPA. So I wanted to just give an overview of the IASC strategy on protection from sexual exploitation, abuse, and sexual harassment. We have three main priority areas. The first one is encouraging victims to come forward and a speak up culture. And there's work on improving our collective engagement mechanisms. How do we have appropriate and trustworthy community-based complaint mechanisms? How do we ensure that if the complaints do come in, they're referred to the appropriate agency? And how do we foster trust and engagement with those that we're working to serve? We'll hear more about that from Amit, because that was one of the focuses of the UNHCR strategy. The second main priority under the IASC PSEA in sexual harassment strategy was improving quality, survivor-centered support and protection, ensuring that we have appropriate linkages with gender-based violence programming and referral services. And this is a main area that we'll hear about today in today's webinar. And the second part of the webinar is really focusing in on some of the initiatives that the system, both UN side and IASC, have done to improve this area. And on the third main priority under the IASC strategy was to strengthen vetting, reference checking, investigation procedures, and disciplinary measures. So there are several initiatives under this heading, including on the NGO side, improving reference checking with the Interagency Misconduct Disclosure Scheme. On the UN side, we have a database called ClearCheck. So if an employee is found to have is under investigation or has been found guilty of misconduct, that person will not be rehired by the UN system. And other initiatives to strengthen investigations and harmonize our approach to investigations. A lot of the new initiatives are under this website that Sarah has put up on the screen. All the recent policy documents from the IASC, including guidance on how to ensure that we're protecting from sexual exploitation and abuse during the COVID response. There's also a global dashboard, the top right. That little button will show you how we're doing in each of the countries, and also give you access to the relevant documents for each country context, including their action plans, context to their PSEA coordinator, their information sharing protocol if they have one, etc. So let's see. Yes. Why don't I give the floor then without further ado? I just want to do a quick, if anyone's having problems with the sound, or please just write it in the chat and let us know. But I think we're doing well. Not hearing any problems. So I'm going to introduce Amit Sen, who is UNHCR's Senior Interagency Coordinator on Protection from Sexual Exploitation, Abuse, and Sexual Harassment. And he will present on UNHCR's championship year from 2020. Over to you, Amit.
Thank you, and I hope everyone can hear me. Please tell me if I'm not clear. Huge thanks to UNFPA and OCHA for putting this panel together. Really pleased to be with you, to have the opportunity to reflect on our lessons learned as champion. Our High Commissioner, Filippo Grandi, was extremely pleased to assume that role in September 2019, taking over from Henrietta Fore of Unicef. And he held that role until December 2020. And he really saw this as something that he wanted to build on the achievements and the very important work that had been done by prior champions. If you could kindly advance the slide. And in principle, we tried to approach this in a very structured way. We had 3 objectives and 6 deliverables that concretize those objectives. And before we even get into what we're trying to do and how we try to do it, I want to take a bit of a step back. One of the really important framing elements for the High Commissioner's Championship is that we need to look at all forms of sexual misconduct, both sexual exploitation and abuse and sexual harassment, and we need to do that in a holistic and coherent way for 2 broad reasons. One, to our view, they share the same root causes, which are power disparities, gender inequality, and the abuse of authority and the abuse of power. And given those shared root causes, we really wanted to have a way of working that addresses both problems in a complementary but complete fashion. The other element, just experientially, drawing on practical experience, we can't really effectively address either problem in isolation. What we've seen is that if we have an operation or a situation, for instance, where we have very prevalent sexual harassment, it's every likelihood that you're going to have SEA as well. It may not have come to the surface yet, but it's probably going to be there, and vice versa. So we wanted to address these in tandem. And what we'll see as we go through the deliverables, we have 6. 4 out of the 6 actually address both SH and SEA. So going back to the objectives, the first, and you'll see the alignment with the IASC plan that Wendy mentioned, but also a bit of a building on that foundation. The first is to reinforce prevention, improve prevention. The second is to increase safe spaces to speak up. So this goes to reporting, but it's really also about not only policies and procedures that better protect victims and survivors when they do speak up, but creating what we call a speak up culture, making it safer and more supportive. And we can explain some of the steps we've taken there. And the third is on promoting the respectful use of authority. And the 2 quick dimensions there. One is that we found the issue of culture, organizational culture, our values, our attitudes, our norms, our behavior to be immensely, immensely important, because we see this as part of a root cause. So we tried to really prioritize that. Moving over to the deliverables. The first, if you could kindly advance the slide, I'll be coming back. The first is the IASC learning package for partners on sexual misconduct. And as you notice, it's sexual misconduct. So again, it's both SEA and SH. This was done very much in partnership with a broad range of IASC members, including IOM, WFP, as well as OCHA, NRC, ICFA, CHS Alliance. So it was done collectively. And the approach was really to move away from, this is prohibited conduct, don't do this, which is frankly our older way of training, to something that's experiential learning, that draws on actual real case studies, but sufficiently anonymizes them and fictionalizes them, to draw people into real life situations that they can react to, and also put themselves in the shoes, in some instances, of survivors, as well as other stakeholders. It's available in English, French, Spanish, Arabic, and Portuguese. Further translations are forthcoming. And in the online rollout, 375 participants from 40 organizations benefited from the online launch. So that includes 25 PSEA coordinators from 20 countries. And since then, it's being widely rolled out in the field and being adapted for further use, including through virtual presentation. Sarah, if I could trouble you to go back a slide to the list. The next product. This is one of the products. There are two products that focus specifically on SEA rather than SEA and SH together. And the next one is an e-learning on investigations for partners. This is an interesting product because we hear a lot from our partners that this is an area where they really require some capacity support. So the vision here was to develop a training package that's completely online, accessible anywhere, created by investigators for investigators to strengthen that area of capacity, really emphasize the rights and protection of victims and survivors, and also make sure that investigations are sufficiently sound factually, because of course they tell us a lot beyond simply substantiating that a case existed or not. They tell us where, why, and how this is happening, and that can inform our system strengthening as we go forward. The next initiative is the PSEA Community Outreach and Communications Fund. If I can ask you to advance 2 slides, please, Sarah. This is next one, thank you. These are just some images of local projects that were supported through this fund, and I think it's a really interesting initiative. It was founded in the recognition that we really need to do more community engagement. We need to do more listening and more consultation, but more support to communities and community leaders in addressing this issue. So this is a targeted project that's launched in partnership with the International Council of Voluntary Agencies, ICFA. So it's a full partnership with ICFA. And basically what it does is provide targeted financial support, small grants, to local NGOs that very often work the most closely with people in crisis, but may lack the financial resources to really expand what they're doing. So when it was launched in 2020, we received 1,600 applications from local NGOs, and out of that, we were able to fund 19 in the first round. And I wanted to just very quickly, using these photos, go through what some of those projects look like, because I think we're learning a lot from them. The first image you'll see in the top left is a project in Nigeria. It's supported by a local, implemented rather, by a local NGO called GRID, doing really interesting work. They are using radio call-in programs. So again, it's a dialogue, it's two-way communication. It's listening as well as informing. Videos, they're crafting songs with communities. The image you see is on a consultation with women with disabilities. They're also distributing thousands of copies of national legislation on GBV laws, on applicable legal protections and frameworks in that country. The next image you see of the woman wearing the mask is a project in Brazil. Really exciting project using very diverse methods like community theater and outreach, working with refugee and migrant children, LGBTQI people of concern, and really jointly crafting messages and approaches that meet community needs. The next image to the right is a project in Iraq, in the Kurdistan region of Iraq, by an NGO called Lotus Flower. Really interesting. Not only did they do engagement and awareness around issues, but they actually established a new reporting channel through that consultation that, hey, maybe what we have is not working well enough. It's not a question just of awareness. It's also a question of improvement through community input. The image on the bottom left is a NGO called Sepizdu that works in Cameroon. And they tried to reach 500,000 people through radio, TV, dramas, print, and the image we see is a community consultation with people with disabilities. The final image is a really interesting one. It's from a project in the Philippines. What's so interesting about this, and what you'll see in all these images, is that it's the engagement with people and the listening process and the community leadership process. What I really like about that last project is that the community facilitators were all from the affected population. They were IDP, mostly women from the affected population. So that's a project that we're learning a lot about, and if time permitting, I'd be happy to reflect further on some of our lessons learned. Sarah, if I could trouble you to go back to that first slide with the list. Okay, so the remaining 3 initiatives are interesting initiatives because they all go to this issue of our norms, our values, our culture as humanitarian organizations. And the first one that you see in this list is this communications package for IASC principals and managers. And the idea here was to develop a tool that all IASC principals can use to foster dialogue on all forms of sexual misconduct, again, SEA and SH, to facilitate what can often be uncomfortable discussions, but in a way that promotes transparency and that speak-up culture. And although this package was designed for face-to-face engagement, we believe that it lends itself to online use and can be adapted more broadly. The next product, if we can go to the final slide, I'm sorry, we jumped around a bit. Wrapping up, the final slide, please. Thanks. The next product, almost done, was a session for the IASC principles on organizational culture just this January, where our High Commissioner facilitated that discussion, very well attended. We had 24 participants representing all IASC organizations, and looking at really interesting things like unconscious bias, power, gender, and it was very positively received. And just last week, that same session was actually provided to the community of humanitarian coordinators. And it was also provided to the Chief Executive Board on sexual harassment. So again, we're looking at both elements, sexual harassment and SEA. And we'll be developing a facilitator's guide so that organizations can take similar sessions forward internally and independently.
Thanks, Amit.
Oh, sorry, running out of time or out of time?
Yes.
Sorry, okay. Maybe just the very last thing is that we're compiling a collection of good practices on culture change, which we'll publish in 2021. So sorry for going a bit late, and thanks for the time.
Thanks, Amit. I do believe there are some questions for you in the Q&A section, so maybe if you could answer those directly, then we can gain some time on our Q&A later. So now I'd like to pass to the current IASC champion on PSEA and sexual harassment. It's UNFPA's Executive Director, Natalia Kamen. But Eva, who's their senior coordinator, will present on their priorities. Over to you, Eva.
Thanks so much, Wendy. Thanks, Amit. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, very happy to present also the UNFPA Championship today. Our Executive Director, Dr. Kanem, took this role on in January 21 and is following Filippo Grandi and other champions in these big footsteps, and very honored and humbled also, obviously, for this role. We will build on the work of the previous champions, very obviously, and focus on 3 core priorities under the championship. Could we go to the next slide, please? This is first to bolster PSEA country mechanisms. We know that a lot has been done across the sector over the past couple of years. What we want to focus on, all of us together now, is obviously to make sure that these mechanisms are effectively working on the ground. And this includes the investment in sustainable resources at the outset of our response under the responsibility of the humanitarian and resident coordinators. Second priority is to strengthen access to quality, not only assistance, but also information to prevent that we will have victims in the end. And this is obviously a core area of priority for UNFPA. UNFPA, as the lead agency in the area of gender-based violence, is also providing assistance to victims of sexual exploitation and abuse, and as such, obviously uniquely positioned, but also interested to strengthen this field. Last, the third priority is to strengthen coordination and coherence across our systems. We know and we see from the number of participants today as well that collaboration and communications across the sectors has immensely increased in the past. But we also know that we need to do more. We want to reach out and include partners, civil society organization, women's group, and recipients to really ensure that we take a holistic, as Amit mentioned, but also mostly victim-centered approach to all our initiatives. We have a year under the championship like everyone else, so we try to strike a balance between what we want to promote and advocate for, but also to reach some very tangible results under 5 priority initiatives. And they include, first and foremost, we are building a roster of PSEA experts. Ideally, we know we would want to have full-time dedicated qualified resources in every country operational settings. In practice, this is not the case. Many of our staff are currently double-hatting in this role, including also in UNFPA. And we want to make sure that we create a roster of trained, vetted people who can be deployed to humanitarian, but also developmental contexts. We have initiated the recruitment. We have received enormous interest. Are currently in the selection process. The candidates will be vetted and trained by IOM and should be ready for deployment in mid-August. We're not doing this alone. There are other initiatives going on, and we're working closely with the Norwegian Refugee Council to join efforts and provide as broad as possible support to the system. The second initiative includes an external review of the IAC approach. There has been a review in 2010, which is a while ago, and a lot has happened in the meantime. So the objective of this renewed reviews to build on the findings of the first review, but more broadly assess the progress made and the effectiveness and impact of the measures we have taken so far. We were fortunate enough to recruit the external expert who already did the first review, and she is working with the guidance of a small IAC steering committee advisory panel, and will issue a final report in the third quarter, which will be submitted by Natalia Kanem as champion to IAC principal for consideration and acceptance, obviously, of findings and recommendations. Other initiatives include an advocacy campaign on consultations with UN and non-UN actors. And the goal here really is to reach a critical mass of people in dialogue and consultation to spread the word and to provide quality information. We are focusing on a number of 35 high-risk countries where we hold communications and sessions starting at the country team level, but then trickling down, including partners, civil society, women's group, and as I said before, obviously also recipients of assistance to make sure that we spread the word as widely as possible, and obviously also mostly hear back from what's going on the ground. Last but not least, and that leads, I think, into the session that Carly will then moderate, we are developing a training module for GBV practitioners. And this will really to ensure that GBV practitioners, case managers on the ground are fully trained in PSEA modules. It will be included into existing IAC GBV training modules and really focus on safe referrals, safe ethical mandatory reporting, and guidance on what a victim-centered approach to PSEA means. It is an ambitious agenda. It is what we want to believe and hope also a meaningful agenda. And as I said before, we're really striving to achieving meaningful results that will ultimately serve the IAC system. And I will conclude here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So we do have some Q&A in the box there, and we'll have a few minutes for that before we move to the second part of this webinar. There was a lot of interest, Amit, on the e-learning for investigations. So I wonder if you could address it. The question is, when will it be launched? And if so, how will they be able to receive the e-learning? So Amit, can you come back and answer those two questions?
Sure. The e-learning will be launched this year. It will be beta tested with a select group of partners. So we are going to make sure that we get some feedback on its usability. It's really intended to be very user-friendly. We can be sure to include an announcement to make sure that all participants are aware, and it's available to everyone. Okay. Right. The collection of good practices, there are some questions there that will also be published this year, and that'll highlight good practices of a broad spectrum of actors, certainly not just UNHCR. Thanks.
Okay, and then there was also a question about what is the communication package. I think they're possibly referring to the communication package for leaders that you referred to.
That's right. It's what we call as a comms package. So it's supposed to be a tool that senior leaders can use in any organization to structure and facilitate these dialogues around our values, around sexual misconduct, around what's happening. I think it just supports this idea that we need to be talking about this within our agencies to grapple with it, but those are hard discussions. So it's a tool that's intended to facilitate the discussion in a safe and constructive way. Thanks.
So just a little bit more insight, because I've been in several of those presentations. It is a screening of some real life testimonies, and then participants in this facilitated session talk about what they would do and how they assist the victim. And so it's really engaging in things that they're confronted with and some of the challenges in confronting them. Ava, there's a question also for you around the GBV training package. When will it be available? Again, question. People are eager to receive these tools.
The anticipated rollout is in October to November this year, and we'll start with a couple of pilot countries. It will include both an e-learning module and a module for face-to-face training. And to add on what Amit just said, this communication package is fantastic, and we're also using it currently in our advocacy campaign in the championship countries that we're targeting.
Great. And thanks for those of you who are able to find the Q&A section. You see on the screen, it's down. If it's not appearing on your sidebar, you have to go to the three little dots on the bottom right and open up the Q&A. but it'll help us track, because then each of my panelists can click on the question and reply specific to that question. So you'll have the question and the answer right next to it, which is easier than scrolling through the whole chat and trying to follow, and chats and questions and answers intercalés, mixed up. So my panelists, I invite you to go to the Q&A section. You click on the question you want to respond to, you type the answer in the chat, and you post it, and we'll see both the questions and answers all together in one spot there. I have a little bit more time, so I'm going to just take 2 more questions. There was a question from Rachel. Rachel is asking if your approach to funding is part of a broader localization approach. How are you working with UN NGO partners to ensure that coordination is part of a broader spectrum to avoid that in the actions or review? I don't understand the second part of that question. I don't know. Rachel, did you want to come in and explain your question?
Thank you, Wendy. I would like to see, in terms, beside the localization approach as a broad spectrum, how we are ensuring that in terms of the broader coordination as we work within the NGO partners, UN agency, because it's part of the PSEA gender communication and engagement, how all of these are intertwined together to ensure that we have some kind of effectiveness on what we are doing as a broader spectrum. Thank you.
Amit, can you?
I'll be pleased. I think it's a really good question. And I think for us, all of us, we see this as a shared responsibility. It can't be addressed in isolation. If we have SEA cases, it's going to affect all of us. Increasingly, we all have shared partners. So one of the things we've done, and I really want to thank Wendy and Eva and others, because it's not the effort of one entity, but all of us together, is we've tried to come up with a really streamlined and consistent way of assessing and supporting partners to meet the standards that are in the UN protocol on SEA allegations involving our implementing partners. There are certain standards that they have to meet, certain steps that we have to take. So we formulated what we call the common assessment tool or harmonized assessment tool to have one process by which partners are assessed, and we identify areas for strengthening, and we jointly try to go through that strengthening work together. And if there's interest, I can put the tool in the chat or the Q&A, and we can provide some more background. The other thing is that all of us, I think, are trying to develop tools that really do try to meet the needs that partners have for development. One of them is that package, the learning package on saying no to sexual misconduct, which is more general on principles, but also some specialized tools like the e-learning, which is for investigative capacity. As well as the work on, I think, on some of the work on culture change. It's also trying to harness some of the very good work and innovative work coming out from partners. So we're not only saying, we're here to build your capacity, we're very much eager to learn from our partners as well. Thanks.
Great, thanks. So we're going to come back at the end of the second panel to have a little bit more engagement and discussion with you all. Thanks for those of you who are asking questions in the Q&A, and we're going to be responding to them in the course of this session. So now we go into the second part of our panel, which is focusing on support to victims and survivors, both protection and assistance. And we're going to feature Carly Owens from UNFPA, who's a PSEA specialist there, and who's going to speak to the research and mapping that they've done, both their findings from that mapping done at the country level and their way forward. She'll be followed by Katie Weplow from UNICEF's PSEA lead, as well as who she represents UNICEF in engaging with IASC activities. And then we'll hear from Elisa Capoletti, who's based in Afghanistan as the GBV Area of Responsibility Coordinator, and then Amy Mpala, who's the International Rescue Committee Regional Safeguarding Advisor for West Africa and Central Africa. But first, let me hand the floor to Carly. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Wendy, and thank you, Eva and Amit, for your presentations. So in 2020, UNFPA conducted an analysis on GBV, PSEA, and referral systems on improving safe and ethical access for for victims of SEA to GBV support services. This acknowledges and reiterates that GBV support services are the appropriate response services for victims of SEA, and also promotes the idea that PSEA is not a standalone pillar, but linked to existing interagency mechanisms and interagency accountability, which we all implement through the IASC. So this analysis was accomplished through a literature review over the course of 5 months. We had 25 key informant interviews from various UN agencies, NGOs, international organizations, which included global leaders, heads of safeguarding, and PSEA, and the victims' rights advocate. We had a survey with respondents from over 70 organizations. Specifically, the analysis sought to address 3 main points, which are understanding the current status of victim assistance for victims of SEA. We sought to understand the current status of the perception of PSEA into GBV interagency mechanisms as they pertain to victim assistance. For instance, we were looking into referral pathways as one of those very important mechanisms. We also sought to understand and identify current gaps in services for victims of SEA, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. If you can go on to the next slide, please. Sarah? Okay, so these are the 3 main findings, which we also attached recommendations to them. So GBV support services as a basis for SEA victim assistance. One of the main findings is that GBV programming and therefore GBV support services are grossly underfunded. They account for only 1% of all humanitarian funding, according to a report from IRC, I believe, in 2019. The existing support services as well may not meet the additional needs of survivors of SEA. Some of those needs may include extended and additional legal services, including support for pursuing paternity and child support claims for victims. These additional legal services that could potentially go on for years, much longer than some of the humanitarian projects would allow. In crisis, we have 6 months to a year, maybe lucky enough to get 2 years of legal services, which I'm sure you are all very much aware of the short amount of time we have to accomplish those things. In addition, we have psychological support that should theoretically be offered by GBV case managers during investigations, which is going to be tying into that championship initiative that Eva mentioned. We have increased safety and protective services due to retaliation, implementing more shelters, safe houses, witness protection programs that go beyond the traditional GBV services that we can offer. We also have support for women who bear children as a result of SEA and support for their children, including psychosocial support and financial support for schooling. We don't really have a solution to that, and it's a very, very complex issue, but we do need to address the fact that this is a huge gap. Furthermore, GBV referral pathways that we analyzed from the majority of the 35 countries, priority countries of IASC, I couldn't really find any that contained explicit information on SEA victim assistance. And shockingly, even how to report, like there was not even like a hotline or something from what I could tell, which is kind of like a minimum standard that I believe we should have. So moving on to the next finding and recommendations. Respecting the rights and wishes of survivors, ensuring safety, dignity, and respect, our standard definition of the victim-centered approach. This needs improvements within the context of SEA reporting, investigations, SEA victim assistance, really defining what victim-centered means, not just talking about it, but really implementing those ideas of dignity, respect, empowering victims, allowing them to make their own decisions. It's very complex within the PSEA process. you know, because we tend to get very carried away with those investigations and wanting to throw these services on them without even asking them, do you want these services? And obviously we have major issues surrounding confidentiality, which could also lead to retaliation. So in general, there's a need for more guidance to inform the implementation of the UN Protocol on Victim Assistance, which my colleague from Unicef will address in a few minutes. So we do have these protocols in place, but however, there is an extreme lack of guidance, which also makes sense because, you know, these protocols are very new. PSEA as a subject is also quite new. So it does make sense. However, you know, we need to really get the ball rolling on that because this is potentially causing more harm and leading to unmet expectations for victims. Lastly, we have information sharing and information management. So there's not really a shared agreement across organizations. There's no real global standard information sharing protocol. It kind of just depends on your country. Importantly for my research, we don't really have much information, disaggregated information on the types of SEA and also victim assistance being offered to them. So it's hard for us to know how we should be building our PSEA programming around that if we have no idea really what's going on there. We have a bit more information on, you know, GBV through the GBV IMS, so perhaps we can kind of mirror that. I'm running out of time. So some of the recommendations based on these core findings would be absolutely to advocate to donors for increasing funding for GBV programming. We've been doing this for a long time. However, it's needed, and the members of the IASC should really commit to this. So these recommendations are really for the IASC and those working under the umbrella of the IASC. So we would like them also to commit to strengthening global interagency common understanding of SEA and how this is integrated into GBV, how one and the other are the same. So we need to also commit to continuing to develop and integrate PSEA into global interagency GBV guidance, training modules, and tools for GBV support service providers, which again ties into this amazing championship initiative that we will all be working on. We would like organizations to commit to improving information sharing and information management by establishing global minimum standards as a group and safe information sharing, which has been a topic for, you know, several years. It's could be quite controversial. However, we need to continue that discussion, even if it is difficult. We would like organizations and interagency as a whole to commit to establishing universal accountability frameworks in countries to ensure coherence of information sharing within the boundaries of confidentiality and data protection. Again, these are all very difficult subjects to tackle, but also very important, and we shouldn't really shy away from some of these more controversial conversations. So I really appreciate what's been going on at the interagency level and our work on this. So that's it. I'm a bit over time. Thank you all for listening to this overview. The report is currently undergoing final approval by our agency, but we hope it will be with you very soon. And with that, over to you, Wendy. Thank you.
Thanks. And I'm actually going to go right over to Katie Weplow from Unicef, who's their program lead for UNICEF's work on PSEA and represents UNICEF in engaging with Interagency Standing Committee PSEA work. And I think she's going to talk to us about the Victims Assistance Protocol and implementation of the same. Over to you, Katie.
Thank you so much, Wendy, and good morning and good afternoon, colleagues. It's nice to see a lot of familiar names on the line. So I have been asked to speak to the Victim Assistance Protocol. So I will go through this shortly with a view to kind of laying out what's next in terms of the implementation. So next slide. So in terms of the background, this is actually not a new area of work. In 2007, the UN General Assembly adopted a comprehensive strategy on assistance and support to victims of SEA that actually lays out a comprehensive policy framework on this issue. But one of the ways in which we have been seeking to move the agenda is to be able to update some of those policy areas, to be able to speak to the evolving nature of the interagency landscape in terms of the HC, HCT RC-UNCT engagement and the way in which we're working now at the interagency level, at country level. So here's a brief timeline. I see my colleague Yasna, who's on the line, who's been supporting the work on the trust fund. I also see Kyo on the line, who's in the Office of the Victims' Rights Advocate. I think the one thing that I just want to highlight is the fact that even though this particular work stream stems from the UN side, this protocol was developed and endorsed by a UN high-level steering group, that the priority on this area actually reflects the work on the IASC side as well. In December 2018, IASC principals endorsed a plan for accelerating PSEA in humanitarian action, in humanitarian response that prioritizes survivor-centered assistance as one of 3 priority areas. So this work stream is very much about implementing and supporting the IASC's work on this as well. Next slide, please. In terms of the purpose and the scope of this area of work, so the Victim Assistance Protocol outlines a common set of norms and standards for the provision of assistance through the UN system. It applies to all UN system organizations, and it provides an operational framework that's informed by GBV and child protection programming and best practices. If you look at the protocol itself, you'll see references to technical guidance. It doesn't seek to duplicate what we already know is out there, but does seek to make those resources more widely available. In order to support the implementation of the protocol, Unicef, together with a number of our interagency partners, the DMS-PC from the UN Secretariat, the UN Office of the Victims' Rights Advocate, UNHCR, UNFPA, and IOM, as well as IASC representation, have worked together to develop a technical note and training package. So I will speak briefly to the technical note, which we are in the final stages of developing and will be rolling out later this month with the support of my colleague Ivana, who's also on the line. The technical note is intended for interagency PSEA coordinators, networks, PSEA specialists, PSEA and GBV child protection specialists and practitioners. And it provides practical guidance on how to assist victims, how to address the specific considerations for SCA victims, including children, how to address gaps in services, and how to implement the protocol and the note in the context of effective coordination at the interagency level. Next slide. The protocol and the technical note articulate core principles around victim assistance. So when we talk about a victim-centered or survivor-centered approach, that obviously applies to the entire continuum of work that's being done on PSEA. In terms of how that overall approach applies to the provision of victim assistance, you'll see some of those core principles articulated, such as around safety and dignity in care and treatment. That's in accordance with the do no harm principle. When we talk about victim-centered, that might mean that, for example, assistance which is based on needs also takes into account the desires and wishes of the victim. We have had instances where, for example, there's been such a risk of creating stigmatization just by merely receiving services that services that are offered may be refused. So, you know, how do we apply that victim-centered approach within the provision of assistance itself? In terms of child victims of SCA, providing assistance and support in a manner that's consistent with the best interest principle. And then importantly, and this is reflected also in terms of the overarching policy framework, that assistance begins upon the receipt of an initial complainant. So there's never, and there never should be, a need to be able to prove or participate in an investigation or in order to receive assistance. That's a critical element that's reflected in the protocol as well as in the guidance that's forthcoming. Next slide. In terms of the referrals for assistance, this is very much in line with our ongoing work around GBV and child protection. Again, assistance is based on individual needs, but that in general, it reflects a comprehensive, holistic approach to the provision of assistance, which may include basic material assistance, mental health and psychosocial support, medical care, safety and security, as well as access to legal aid. In relation to this last point around legal aid, this has been one of the overarching challenges that we have seen And we have been working this past year with the Office of the Victims' Rights Advocate and OHCHR to see what further can be done in order to address some of the gaps in legal aid. And I'm happy to speak further about that later. Next slide. The protocol outlines roles and responsibilities on victim assistance. And it's important to note that while the actual provision of assistance is and should always be done in accordance with the existing referral pathways on the ground, that the responsibility for ensuring that that assistance is provided rests with the relevant UN organization of the perpetrator. That does not mean that that organization is responsible for the direct provision of assistance, but that the responsibility of ensuring that that assistance is provided rests with that respective organization. And that's why having clear roles and responsibilities on the ground is critical, because it has to reflect both the overarching roles and responsibilities from the senior-most level, such as, for example, the RCHC and the UNCT-HCT having overall responsibility on PSEA, down to the individual agency or entity roles and responsibilities, to then, on the next slide, looking at the roles and responsibilities of technical actors on the ground. And that's where the technical note, which will be aimed at supporting interagency PSE coordinators, for example, who are responsible for working with GBV subcluster and child protection working groups in order to make sure that the referral pathways are integrated into the SOPs of the PSEA network, that will be also a critical step in making sure that the protocol is fully implemented. And then in the next slide, I just want to highlight the fact that this is something that Wendy had mentioned earlier. This has been for UNICEF a key area of contribution for us in terms of the ongoing IASC work. This past year, we supported the establishment of an interagency PSEA field support team through the secondment of a dedicated coordinator for that. And as part of that, developed and launched this website and global dashboard in order to track progress. This overarching system is important in terms of the implementation of the protocol, because if we go to the next slide, we see that in terms of the ongoing mappings that we have supported for the past 2 years, that when we look at, for example, where do we stand overall in terms of the integration of referral pathways into PSEA network SOPs, we see that between 2019 to 2020, we have made progress, but that there's additional work that's needed. And this is where the implementation and training for the technical note will be seeking to address some of these ongoing gaps. And then similarly, in terms of overall access to assistance, we see that there are a number of ongoing gaps in order to make sure that any survivor that may come forward within the context of a humanitarian response may face challenges there. And that's why we're very pleased to see that UNFPA has prioritized the mobilization of resources for GBV programs as part of their IAC Champion. So thank you so much, and happy to speak further and answer any questions on this. Over to you, Wendy.
Thanks so much. And I know some have been asking whether they'll get a copy of these slides, which are quite comprehensive, and we will indeed make them available on the interagency website. So now, without further ado, I'm going to pass the floor to Elisa Capoletti, who is the gender-based violence area of responsibility subcluster coordinator in Afghanistan, and she's going to speak about how GBV response services can contribute to PSEA, and especially on how it helps on the prevention aspects.
Yes, thank you very much, Wendy. Thank you all for attending today. So from our side, and as a segue from the previous presentation and the integration of the referral pathway in the PSEA network SOP, what we are doing in Afghanistan actually is in the same line, but at the same time, we are integrating PSEA in the referral pathway. So strengthening the referral pathway, ensuring that we are asking the service providers who is the PSEA focal point within the organization, and at the level of the facility itself, if they have staff that have been trained on SEA that are able to work, that we are able to contact. We are trying as well to mainstream PSEA and the contact of the PSEA network coordinator within our guidance notes. And when it comes about the absence of service available, we are willing now to work with the health cluster to ensure that we are supporting and mainstreaming GBV and PSEA within the health service providers. It has been mentioned already, then it's about the training for the case managers. I personally did so and in a past life in the Rohingya response, and we will replicate. We discussed this with the PSEA network coordinator in Afghanistan. We will replicate the SEA of GBV case management training for the case workers in that are operating in our response. Of course, it's wide, so we will start with pilots, and then we will see how we can cascade the trainings. But as you were mentioning, and it's the part of the prevention, I strongly believe, and I can be very much repetitive on this, that as GBV actors and as GBV area of responsibility, we need to be the amplifier of the PSEA network. We need to support their work, not just when it comes about specific referral pathways and service provision, but even before at the level of the prevention, because everything that GBV and PSEA network do together is to ensure that there are no victims. So the part of the prevention becomes fundamental, and working with both awareness raising of staff and communities is something that we can support. So, for example, every time that we do have a training on GBV core concepts, it's paramount that we mention the code of conduct, the difference between GBV and SEA, and we do have short refreshers on what PSEA is and the code of conduct itself. And as my motto, we need to work together to ensure that we are translating the zero tolerance into zero impunity. I hope this was quick enough and useful, and over to you, Wendy.
Thank you so much. We will have time after this last presentation by Amy Mpala to have a little bit of Q&A on the second panel around victims services and support and protection. So over to you, Amy. She's speaking to us from Nairobi. She's the Regional Safeguarding Advisor for International Rescue Committee, covering West Africa and Central Africa. Over to you, Amy.
Thank you, Wendy. And on behalf of IASC, I thank very much UNFPA for giving us the opportunity to share our experience and the effort that IASC is making on PSEA and also on victim assistance and the linkage with the GBV programming. And also thank you to all of you for attending today. So our main achievement in this piece of work is that after someone have been brave enough to report, we apply a survivor-centered approach, as it has been said. And for us, a survivor-centered approach means that the person who experienced violation can decide when or how to report, and can decide to seek the support or proceed with an investigation. And it's also when a person is listened to and decides what actions he or she wants to take, and also that he or her consent is obtained before any action in his favor is done. So if the consent is provided, we can proceed with making the report, which is one of piece of our work. As we know, exploitation and abuse is about taking away someone's power to say yes or no. So part of our survivor-centered approach is giving back that power to say yes or no, which can be incredible healing. To ensure survivor-centered approach is adapted, IASC starts by training the staff, especially the one who directly provides services to the survivor. For example, the response officers, the child protection officers, the case management, the GBV nurses, and so on. And after that, all the staff are trained on sexual exploitation and abuse on our safeguarding policy. We have a safeguarding policy and a child safeguarding policy, and they are also trained on how to make reports. There's also a feedback mechanism, and different sections are clients' response mechanism through which clients can report sexual exploitation and abuse as well as GBV cases. The link between sexual exploitation and abuse and GBV programming starts here. So the survivor-centered approach is integrated into PSEA's SOPs that we make in place with the link to the GBV services. The SEA dimension of GBV is always taken into account. The GBV response services are offered based on the client request, as it was said before, and also the consent to all services, including clinical care, documentation, referral, and examination. The consent is both verbal and written, but if we can't have the written one, we can have the verbal and then write for the survivor. I'm trying to share the experience in Africa, so sometimes the survivor can't read or write, so we can write for her and we can have someone from the community who can assist. The program prioritizes survivors' experience, needs, and wishes. We always gather information on survivor perspective through conducted safety audit, clients' feedback, assessment, and use the same to improve programming. In most of our country program, we practice cross-sector linkage and cross-referral to ensure that all GBV and SEA survivors receive all the requested services through the GBV program. So among those key, we observe that we ensure that we make we seek the consent of the survivor. We make sure that the survivor are informed about all the options available to them to make judgment, and also we ensure that survivors are satisfied with the services that we provide, and satisfaction surveys are usually conducted to measure the satisfaction. And also we ensure that all the services are confidential and information protection and sharing protocol are strictly adhered to. So IASC after that conduct listen sections with women and girls and sometimes boys and men, including GBV and SEA survivors, to receive feedback on the services provided and to undertake how best they want to be served in the future. So this ensures that investigations or interventions are responsive to needs of clients and that we will be doing the best we can after that. During the case management, we observe and adhere to the guiding principles that solidify survivor-centered approach with regards to right to safety, confidentiality, right to dignity, and non-discriminations. We have also communication materials like posters that have been printed and put in some strategic places to disseminate the linkage information, and this is continuous awareness on sexual exploitation and abuse, and all survivors are encouraged to report incidents through the GBV support centers that we have put in the community. We also have the reporting mechanisms. There are confidentiality and confidential reporting mechanism either through the GBV hotline for clients and through ISU. ISU is our ethic and compliance unit, which hold all part of the investigations. And in case that the survivor is not feeling well or insecure, he can go through the ISU system, and we provide the number and also the language in which he can talk. Also, we can have also the email address. There is also an established complaint mechanism, and through protection and also our GBV department, feedback are gathered and used to improve services delivery. Established referral pathways are in place in the communities, and our child protection and GBV program and staff participate in regular coordination forums to ensure that pathway is updated regularly. And through gender champions, we have those gender champions are like focal points in each office and in each location. Through those people, we have provided an external referral pathway for additional services such as counseling in case any staff or a client would want to access external services. We also have this component of community engagement, which is regularly strengthened and awareness raising adapted to the context, to the culture, the language, and also the age of the audience. Communities and beneficiaries are made aware of the available services, when and how to access. And when it comes to a sexual exploitation and abuse case involving a child, services and practices are tailored to them, and our child protection staff or partners, our implementing partners, ensure that the case is managed according to the child, his age, and the parents' willing. We always make sure that the parents or the legal caretaker are involved in all the process and give the consent on the behalf of the child. And if the child is old enough, he can participate in the consent with after consulting the parent or the legal taker. So there's an advantage to being an NGO with a GBV programming and a child protection program, so that we can at the same time provide service for the adults and providing services for children. We face some challenges, as you can see. A key challenge is to support all the staff partners to understand what is the survivor-centered approach, what is really the survivor-centered approach, and what is means, and how to move trauma to be more trauma-informed and not to victim blame. And responding to a survivor is a skill that needs to be learned so that no further harm is caused. So we try to train our staff. Under or short-term GBV funding is something which is very difficult for us. It's so important that people understand that recovery as a survivor is not linear. It's like a roller coaster, and that can last for years, for months, or for days. It depends. The GBV funding is actually inadequate and less prioritized, and life-saving services such as clinical care for GBV survivor and female and children. For example, the safe spaces to be continue to be significantly underfunded and deprioritized in human responses. We were in Central African Republic last month, and we saw only one safe space in Bangui for all the country, and this is not enough for the country and for the number of the survivors that you can find in this country. And if you add the logistics and all the conflict in place and this logistic challenge, it's really difficult for the survivors to access the services. And we also looked at some of the services in place. As our colleague from Unicef and UNFPA said, there's a huge gap of services, for example, for legal assistance and sometimes for medical care, because you can't find medical doctors and nurses everywhere, and even hospitals or medicines. Another challenge is how to prioritize the safety and well-being of the survivor. How we can do to really upholding our wider safeguarding responsibility is one of our challenge. Another challenge that we are observing actually is the reporting barriers. Among many fears of reporting because of, for example, the context, the security, the culture, I would like to add the fear we are observing actually. When a safe and confidential reporting system is very well established by one NGO or a partner, we observe an increase in the number of cases reported by the community. And at the same time, the NGO or the partner is managing to make sure that the case is being handled in the good way. He's struggling to find support, technical support to conduct investigation and so on. And we are sometimes surprised to see that the NGO can be marked as a risky one. So this is pushing some of our partners and some NGOs to stop reporting. So I will make some recommendations. I think after working in the field, being prepared in advance before you get a report to minimize the delay in getting support to a survivor and assure quality services centered support is something very good. We should be prepared by having, it's time.
If you can maybe make your final points and bring the rest up, I'm sure there's some questions and comments people would like to bring.
Just to be prepared in advance. And also I will advocate for a long-term support services to be funded by the donor, more investment in local support services providers. We have very good local partners in the field and they need to be supported to make sure that they are giving the best they can. Thank you, Wendy.
Great, thanks. So I think we've had some a lot of interesting presentations. I see a lot of also good resources available in the chat because we do have on the call many experts both in the region and globally at headquarters. So I'm glad that we're having additional resources available to you if you can look through the chat. There are people are posting information about the misconduct disclosure scheme and the trust fund for victims of sexual exploitation and abuse. I would like to invite my panelists, all of them, to put your videos on because I'm going to now go to some of the questions that we received both in the chat and the Q&A. And I'm going to ask Dominica for her help in posing those questions. But let me first start with one here about kind of the question is, among all the countries that we're prioritizing for the championship activity, what are the reasons where some countries are having success? I'm not going to point out which countries because I don't think we want to go into any kind of ranking in that way, but are there things that we can pull out that we'd like to say are good practices and really contribute to success? Just wave your hand, presenters here, if you want to answer that question. Okay, I'm going to go for Katie and then Amit.
Thanks. And that's actually an excellent question. I think in a way, the work that we've done collectively to have a dashboard and tracking in a way is partly aimed at that, of looking at, what are the good practices that are working and how can we make sure that we have a more systematic approach across the board. I think a few things just to highlight. One of the things that I think is abundantly clear is the need to make sure that PSEA is implemented from the outset. So in terms of looking at countries where there has been more effort around prevention is more possible when we have PSEA implemented from the outset. So the timing is critical. The work that has been done to strengthen and scale up interagency PSEA coordinators and have them readily deployable is also a critical piece, as is some of the basic things around making sure that there is a clear action plan and strategy that is developed and endorsed at the most senior levels and is actively tracked and implemented on the ground, ongoing training, capacity development, etc. I think that we could further speak to what is most effective or what are we seeing as most effective in terms of the IASC priority areas, what's working in terms of safe and accessible reporting and where are the challenges. Similarly around survivor-centered assistance, which we really dove into here, as well as the investigation. So without taking it down into all those levels, these are a few of my top line responses to that question.
Great, thanks. Did you want to compliment Amit?
Yeah, very much the same. I mean, I think just two quick things are rather high level. One is high level leadership investment in the issue. Not only, I mean, messaging is critical, that's part of culture, you're sending a message, but also prioritization of resources. And what we mean by that, I think there are two things that are very concrete that we want to do more with. One is risk analysis, mapping, and mitigation at the outset. So when we start responding to a new humanitarian crisis, rather than waiting for a rash of SEA cases to arrive and say, oh my goodness, we have a problem. So we now have an SEA risk mapping tool, and we've integrated as an agency SEA risk analysis into our corporate risk register, which is global, as well as tools that specifically look at risks arising in COVID. And the whole idea is to change the way we program, change the way we actually design our programs on shelter, wash, education, livelihoods, cash. So just really wanted to second, I guess, Katie's comments and thank her for the emphasis on leadership and also on data, empirics, and measurement. Thank you.
Great, thanks. There's another question in here about working with government partners. Let's see if I can read out the question. Well, I can't find it now. Maybe, Katie, do you want to, I know you have it at hand. If you could read the question and maybe speak to that based on your recent mission to the Democratic Republic of Congo.
Sure, thanks so much. And colleagues, feel free to come in and compliment. So I think that the question, which is a recurring and very important question, which is basically around how do we coordinate with government actors on PSEA, and what does the interagency coordination structure look like within contexts, particularly that are affected by humanitarian crises, where there may be instability, etc. This, from a protection perspective, is an important issue of concern because of the risks that can happen with referral of allegations to government actors, where there isn't a clear or protective overall framework to support a victim-centered approach. So that has been one of the ongoing areas of discussion and debate, particularly on the UN side, in terms of looking at the application of informed consent and the handling of specific allegations. But I think that the question more broadly, and this is where the experience in DRC is relevant but not unique, is the fact that if we look at the way in which we as the humanitarian system implement public health emergency or humanitarian response more broadly, we do that in close collaboration with government, where the humanitarian actors may, and oftentimes do, include government actors as well as NGOs, UN personnel, etc. And so for that reason, one of the challenges that we saw in DRC, particularly in the context of the 10th Ebola response, was the fact that the absence of a clear cooperative framework with government on PSEA, where the IASC and the UN policies that clearly prohibit SEA, where that's not clearly reflected within the legal and policy framework on the government side, you have ongoing challenges around the application of those standards. And where there's not a clear cooperative way of working around those, and this is one of the things that we saw in DRC, that where allegations are reported, that there's significant challenges in terms of referral and follow-up and taking appropriate action. And that's why the IASC DRC mission report makes a clear call for the need to establish a cooperative framework with government on PSEA.
Great, thanks for that. Does any one of my other panelists want to add to Katie's response on that? If not, I'm going to go to a question for Carly that's in the Q&A. It's a question about funding. So how do we talk to donors? For example, when working, what about working more? So the question is from Michelle again. She always feels that when she's talking to donors, it's possibly not that effective. What about talking to community leaders and local organizations? How about the way we change the way we do advocacy to better engage youth and women organizations? Over to you, Carly.
Thank you. So we weren't able to really touch upon like real local level localization. However, one of the recommendations is definitely engaging them for multiple reasons, because that's, part of our mandate, but also because some of these extended services, can be provided by obviously organizations that are from there and more longstanding. In terms of approaching donors and committing to putting this into our proposals and having it as a top priority is just one way that's obviously very straightforward. Having this conversation on the importance of GBV services and acknowledging that even where they do exist, they sometimes only exist in capital cities and that kind of thing. Also promoting localization within those frameworks. including this in humanitarian response plans is something that's important and also straightforward, but is not always included, PSEA. I don't know, Eva, if you have any comments, because Eva is really the one speaking with the donors, if you want to address that a bit more.
Yeah, thanks, Carly. Yeah, obviously resource mobilization is one of the big and key issues in all this, because all these activities that we're trying to implement need to be costed and need to be explicitly costed and cannot only be absorbed by GBV budgets, as we all know. Donor mobilization is one aspect of that, and I think it is very good that we feel there is momentum, because we all know that we're in this together. This is not only an exclusively a UN issue, so donor fundraising is an aspect, but it's also clear that we internally need to commit not only to implementing these measures, but to invest the funds necessary from our resources to achieve all that. Thanks.
Great, thanks for that. I had also some interesting information I'm seeing in the chat about the Trust Fund for Victims Assistance, and I wonder if, because in our participants, we have about half of our participants on this webinar from NGOs and the other half from the UN. Yasna, I don't know if you can hear me, if you can unmute yourself, and if you want to explain how would NGOs avail of this Trust Fund for Victim Assistance. I know it does more than just direct assistance. Maybe you can explain a little bit.
Thank you, Wendy, and I hope everyone can hear me. Yes, I'm happy to, and I did put a link to the website, the overall PSEA website, where you can see templates and proposals and beneficiaries so far. But perhaps the best way with any specific questions would be to email myself and my colleague Magdalena, who's also on the call, and I put our email addresses. But basically, where it provides, the website will provide, the purpose of the trust fund is really to support gaps in services, additional services as required, or to support GBV services to ensure that the particulars where SEA victims have specific needs, as do other victims, survivors of various types of sexual and related violence. So we want to make sure that the funds provided can support specific needs of SEA victims, which are identified, of course, in our individual, but GBV services, there is no intention to replicate or create new services, as we've said, and I know I see that Jane Connors, Victims' Rights Advocate, is also on the call. It's really to support the struggle of funding, which has been the key since the comprehensive strategy that Katie spoke about was adopted by the General Assembly, is there was no funding for victim assistance. And with the varied partners and the varied services, we realized that's a big gap. We now have just over, we've had a portfolio of about $3 million. We just received a big contribution from the UK. So funds are available, so please apply away. But we are happy to provide specific guidance. NGOs, UN partners, everyone is welcome who have
thanks, Yasna. And there's no restriction on geographic coverage either. It doesn't have to be a place with, okay, great.
Yeah. So please feel free to reach out. Thank you.
Thanks, Yasna. And as Amit has also noted in his chat, that there will be a second round also for the communications fund. So there are resources available. I want to go back to a question in the chat, and this is following Elisa's presentation and her observation about impunity. Hannah Claire writes, I witnessed that there are managers, including some PSEA focal points, that ignore the complaints, and can we somehow be more survivor-centered by also making that a cause for misconduct? How do we remove barriers for investigations?
Can I respond to this in part, if it's possible?
Sure, I don't see you. I mean, do you have your, okay, there you go.
Sorry, no, just a couple things. I think first of all, for UNHCR, failure to report misconduct is misconduct. And secondly, I think one of the other things that's notable is that we need to strengthen our investigations for a number of reasons. It's not simply to hold perpetrators accountable. That's a key element, but there's more. If we don't really find out what happened, we can't do that course correction that Katie was talking about. Why do we have risks? Why do we have this rash of cases? What sector? What are the causal factors? What is making this area of programming so susceptible? So that investigation is just really critical to provide a foundation of fact-finding that we can then use to course correct to reduce risk. The other element is that if our investigations aren't sound, they aren't really solid, we can be overturned before the dispute tribunal or the appeals tribunal. So we really need them to be as strong as possible. That's one of the reasons we're trying to do the e-learning, because we want to strengthen that area. And we understand that many other partners are as well. Thanks.
Thanks. Eva, did you compliment, or Elisa?
Yeah, happy to. I mean, obviously for UNFPA and the entire UN system, the same applies. Not reporting is a form of misconduct. And I think we all agree that this turning a blind eye, there is no tolerance for turning a blind eye for sexual wrongdoing of any sorts. Strengthening investigation is a core priority for all of us, on which we're also working jointly together with our investigation services. We all know the rightful need to expedite and to bolster resources, including through trained investigators in these kind of very specialized investigations. Thank you.
Elisa, you want to come in?
Yes, actually, I wanted to say something very practical that I noticed when I was deployed in the field as PSEA coordinator, and the complaints, the PSEA, not every PSEA coordinator is aware of the complaints that are ongoing in the field. So probably ensuring that there might be a reporting system that and the PSEA coordinator and the PSEA focal point of the organization can help having a neutral PSEA coordinator following up on as this being investigated, as this being sent by the PSEA focal point to the ethics office, etc. So probably having at the country level a double system, a double, not reporting system, but a following up system at the level of the PSEA coordinator could support this. This is just food for thought, and this is what I was finding that would have helped me in carrying out my function. Over.
Thank you. I want to hand the floor to Domenica, who's been monitoring our chat for us. Can you please pull out some more questions maybe that we may have missed in the chat? I'm also going to give participants the chance to take the floor after this last round of questions from the chat. Domenica, over to you.
Yes. Yes, they are not particular question. Okay, it was asked to if the slides will be available and if the webinar will be recorded and posted, and this is yes. And then there is a follow-up question from Anna saying that often, even when we have solid investigation, someone else takes the decision, and often decision makers on investigation protect their staff. I have seen this in NGOs and UN staff. How do we regulate that? This is an interesting question. Maybe Eva, you want to answer? Thank you.
I'll be happy to, because I think it is a perception that many of us are facing, a lack of trust in our system, a perceived impunity. I'm confident to say for the mechanisms that I've seen here that this is not the case and this would not be tolerated. I think what we need to do better is to counter this narrative. And really what we will do in our organization, also advocate more broadly, is to tell the story, to explain the facts, that the struggle we have is balancing confidentiality of these processes with the rightful interest to know. There is obviously an interest by everyone involved or who participated in such a project to know the outcome. Unfortunately, or maybe also fortunately, there is no legitimate need to know for everyone. And I think we in these accountability integrity functions need to be better at communicating what is going on within the boundaries of confidentiality to show that our organizations are actually walking the walk.
Thank you, Eva.
Great, thanks. So we will make the slides available. We will post them in a prominent space on the HNPW site where there is reference, because I think for each session there is a feedback, a little summary report, but we'll make sure there's a link to the slides and if possible the webinar itself, if we can do so. I did want to give anyone who has something they would like to share. Eva, you still have your hand up. Was that for something previously?
That's an old hand. That was an old
Okay.
hand.
Just to see if any of our so many expert participants on this call would like to share something to the group. We have about 15 minutes left before I give the floor back to all the panelists for their parting words. Okay, if not, I want to ask Sarah, our behind-the-scenes facilitator, to put up a Mentimeter. We're going to ask everyone online to give us what you take as your key takeaways. And then I'm going to come back to our panelists for their final thoughts, both in reaction to what our panelists are finding as priorities and what you want us to take away at the end of this webinar. So Sarah, go ahead. I think she put it in the chat, but I don't know if you want to put it on the screen as well. You have to go in and enter on any web device, your phone or your computer, menti.com. Enter the code 753721, and please answer what are your key takeaways. Gareth, I just saw you put something in the chat. Do you want to give us a 3-sentence summary of what that article is?
Certainly, you missed my hand earlier. It was just to say, I think obviously other sectors are also struggling with these challenges where we have real challenges getting kind of concrete reports, and how do we deal when we know generally that there is abuse happening, but we don't know the specifics to investigate. So I thought that might be a useful article for everyone to see as we struggle with these same challenges. Thanks.
Thanks a million, Gareth. I also want to recognize Mayara Freitas from UN Women Brazil, who's put in some interesting references to also the leadership, Circle of Leadership, how they're operationalizing that and working with the government in Brazil. Okay. The UN is consulting the same few people too much. How do we reach people that we're not consulting? Help us. Great. So while we're seeing some of the reactions from the Mentimeter, which we will be able also to include in our summary, I do want to give the floor back to each of my panelists from this rich discussion and the questions that we've gotten. Let me just check and see if I have any additional questions. How can implementing partners align their policy on PSEA with the UN coordination mechanisms? I think there's a lot of work we're doing both on the implementing partner protocol, the capacity assessment, as well as a toolkit that's been made available by Unicef for implementing partners. I don't know, maybe we can put the link to that in the chat. I will do that in response to this question. Okay. Let me go back now to the top of the panel and give you, Amit, a chance to either give your final reactions to some of the comments and questions and a key takeaway for all of us online.
Okay, thanks so much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, brilliant. A lot of really rich stuff here. I think the piece that I'd like to speak to is this element of community consultation. It really, really resonates. Yes, we need to strengthen systems. That's critical. But I think the piece that, if I can be bold, that we're missing perhaps is listening. Okay. When I came to the agency a long time ago, 2004, the only message I got is that this conduct is against the rules, don't do it. And if you see it, report it. That remains true, but it's not nearly enough. And I think the element that we're really missing is the extent to which communities can not only engage, but can lead. One of the things we're finding through this community outreach and communications fund is, perhaps contrary to assumptions, community members of all ages, genders, abilities, capacities, languages, nationalities are ready to step forward and take the lead to help ensure their communities are safe from SEA and that the assistance of the receipt of assistance is dignified and safe. And I mean, we can really draw that out. So I think that there is enough of an evidence base now, and we want to document that more, that shows us that we can do much more with community-led initiatives by women's groups, advocacy groups. I think the other takeaway there, if I may, just for one moment, is that we need to diversify our engagement with stakeholders. What we found through that fund is that we're a refugee agency, but we didn't target necessarily NGOs that have primarily experience in refugee responses. We worked with groups that focus on gender equality, disability rights advocacy, LGBTQI rights advocacy, childhood engagement, child development, WASH. So all these different entry points where they're bringing very specialized capacities, and that's how we're finding that we can better reach underserved and perhaps sometimes unserved communities and really bring them more to the center of this conversation. And we hope to document that more. That really comes out. And then the other element I wanted to say just very fast, I wanted to second Eva's points on confidentiality. I think they're really critical. Yes, we have a need for data and we can do better, I think, in trying to analyze what happens, but that needs to be balanced against the legitimate concerns around the confidentiality of victim information as well. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Amit. And now over to you, Eva.
Thanks, Wendy, and thanks everyone for participating, for the interest in the session. For me, the takeaway is, once more, we're all in this together and we can only fix it together. I think what is very important, what we just heard the last comment, we cannot and we don't want to preach from the ivory tower. This is not a headquarter conversation. We need to come up with practical, workable solution. We need to simplify and consolidate, and we depend on feedback from the ground to achieve this. I mean, we're obviously in UNFPA very pleased to take this forward during the championship and would welcome any feedback after this session, criticism, input, suggestions to make sure that we really come up with workable solutions to some of these problems. Thank you.
Thanks, Eva. Okay, now I'm going to go to my second panel and ask Carl to leave us with some parting thoughts, words of wisdom.
Thank you, everyone, for joining today. Just to mirror some of the points that Emmett and Eva mentioned, from a technical perspective, I'm hearing a lot about victim-centered approach. We hear this every single day, but there is really, really a need to kind of focus on more guidance on that, where I see the IASC is focusing on this year in terms of providing some of that guidance for the UN Victim Assistance Protocol, which is great. A little bit late. Maybe we should have considered this before this protocol and listing out the principles listed in the protocol. I'm also hearing a lot about information sharing, and I do think there's a need to create more guidance, or at least a global understanding or consensus on information sharing and protocols. Building upon some of the country structures where the PSEA coordinator does have access to more of this information. And perhaps a better relationship with the RCHC. Again, protecting that data, keeping it confidential, but we can't ignore the fact that we need that in order to really move forward in a successful way. I'm also hearing a lot about localization and and agree with Amit that we should be using some of this UNHCR Community Outreach and Communications Fund, because from what I understand, it's not being utilized as much as it should be. So getting that kind of word out. Also in terms of victim assistance, we really do need to be speaking more at the field level. And I do agree it's a bit hypocritical coming from my perspective at the HQ, because I don't see a lot of that happening. But it is something that we definitely need to consider. Also more engagement with NGOs and INGOs. Coming from this background myself, I completely understand how we sometimes tend to end up in this UN silo and echo chamber. And of course, working with women-led organizations, local organizations to promote, longstanding victim assistance, and which also adheres to our mandate from the UN protocol on victim assistance. And I think that's all from my side. So thank you again. And if there's any more technical questions on victim assistance, please feel free to throw them my way. Thank you.
Thanks. Katie, let's hear from you.
Thank you so much. Perhaps just kind of two overarching reflections and takeaways from this. I actually came onto this work in 2016, sort of in the aftermath of what happened in Central African Republic. And I think that the overarching work at that time had been to look at how do we make sure that we have systems in place, that those systems work, and that we get our own house in order, so to speak. And I think that along that broader trajectory, I think that there has been a lot of work done over the past number of years since then, and there's still more work to be done. In terms of more work to be done, for example, I think the work on developing a cooperative framework with government will be a key piece. That's an outstanding gap. I think also making sure that we have the systems in place to deploy PSEA specialists and coordinators, and that our humanitarian response procedures reflect that from the outset is another important systems piece that's needed. From UNICEF side, we actually just revised our emergency procedures to include PSEA deployments from the outset, and we're very keen to support the IASC in making sure that that's also reflected at that level. But then I think the second piece, and I think some of the questions that are reflected in the key takeaways, is basically, what does this actually mean? Because having systems in place doesn't necessarily lead us to the meaningful transformative change and outcomes for people on the ground. So what is the relationship between these two pieces? And I think that from that perspective, and I'm speaking as a program person, one of the things that we've seen is that investment in our ongoing programming in this area directly correlates to having more effective systems in place. So for example, when we have invested in scaling up safe and accessible reporting channels at the community level, we see more reports that the UN sends to the Secretary General. Similarly, the work that we're doing now around using digital tools to have SCA rapid risk assessments in order to be able to flag up risks from the outset is a programmatic investment that we think will make the HCTs be able to be more responsive to PSEA. So I think that in terms of the more important question around what is meaningful transformative change, there's a lot more of that discussion that I think we would be keen to have, particularly in terms of what does that look like for survivors? And I think that question around accountability that people are raising is a really key point. So please feel free to reach out. We would love to be in touch with you on those. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Katie, for those parting thoughts. And Amy, now over to you.
Thank you, Wendy. Thank you, everybody. I think a lot have been already said, but I will just add that taking a survivor-centered approach creates space for survivors to feel empowered, which can have positive effect on their healing and recovery process. So it's something we should be having in our everyday work and making sure that when a situation occurs, when a case occurs, we first think about the survivor instead of trying to protect our NGO or to protect ourselves. Our support to a survivor shouldn't depend on whether they are male, female, gay, or whatever. Everyone deserves to the same services and the same level of care and support, and having funds available ready to help a survivor access support services further away from where they are based should be standard practice. And to finish, an increase in cases may be a good thing, it depends, and it's maybe a sign of a very well established reporting system. So for NGOs to continue reporting and to report freely, they need to be open, transparent, without fearing to be punished. They will be reporting and seeking for support and making sure that they are putting in place systems to do the best investigation that they can do, and also to make sure that the recruitment system and the tracking of all the staff and all those who are having access to the NGO, it's safe and it's transparent and it's can be trust. Thank you.
Thanks, Sammy. A very important point that we do want the reports to come out and we want to be able to respond appropriately. And we need to make sure that we don't respond in ways that actually discourages reporting. Shall we then end actually a few minutes early? Just want to see if anyone from my speakers wants to come in from something I forgot to say. If not,
Sorry,
go ahead. Go ahead.
Super fast. No, I just wanted to thank everyone for rooting this in a victim-centered approach. I think that we're starting to really unpack what that means and give it more content. And I wanted to say, with a lot of thanks to other colleagues, not me, that we were very pleased to launch last year a victim-centered approach policy to address all forms of sexual misconduct, both SEA and sexual harassment again. And it's a whole of house approach that tries to bring in all divisions, all units, so it's not siloed. And I really wanted to thank the panelists, I think, for centering that principle, but also really giving it more definition and more clarity. Thanks.
So I wanted to ask you, you mentioned that the communication materials that are produced will be posted. Do you have anything already posted so that we can see some examples of what has been funded?
It's a great point. So what we have now is a updated summary, which, Wendy, I'll have to work with you on getting up on the webpage, but it's complete, that provides some hard statistics on how many communities, what profiles of people were reached, through what vehicles, meaning through which media, through which kinds of engagement. And I think that already fleshes this out a bit. The other thing we're doing in parallel is we're compiling and collecting all the variety of materials and approaches. And they are
that's
diverse.
what I was asking, but those aren't available yet, right?
We're not available yet, but we'll
Okay.
put up the updated summaries and we'll get the materials to you quickly, okay?
Okay,
In
thanks.
open source. Thanks.
Thanks. So I wanted to test the internet now and have everyone put on their cameras if they want to, so we can see you all in engagement. And I want to see if, I think Domenica had some last words that she wanted to share with us. Domenica? Yes, no? That is something in the chat. I'm inviting all participants to put your videos on. See if we see everyone. Domenica or Elisa? Elisa has something to say?
Just a quick,
Elisa. Yes.
Yes, just a quick thing is as a final remark and to as a segue for what Amit was saying before, it's the importance of community and how GBV practitioners do have access to community because we go to the field, we are working with them. So the importance of mainstreaming SEA within the GBV risk analysis, the mapping, the mitigation techniques, accountability is on all of us. And it's not just about victim assistance, it's about even the prevention. So, and all the conversation that we had today just made me think that we are the labor. You tell us what to do and we do it. And that's the important collaboration that we have to move and to foster in this direction. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, and it's great to see all of you. I hope you found this webinar informative. There is a lot of resources available, very rich resources available. We'll make an attempt to have all of the resources available in the summary. We will post them on the PSEA website. You see the link here in the view, but I wanted to put us all back on grid view so you can see everybody. Let me take off the active speaker view. Thanks, everyone. Maybe we can all see each other and wave you all a good day.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Good to see you all.